So around this time, after the HSBC scandal, which happened kind of contemporaneously with LIBOR, not just me, but a lot of other reporters who cover this stuff, the corruption on Wall Street, we started to ask the question, how come nobody's going to jail? How is it possible that one scandal after another happens and there's no indictments, there's no criminal investigations, nobody's getting in trouble for any of this stuff? The New York Times did a big thing about it, the Financial Times covered it, there were a lot of other reporters, and I started to ask this question myself, and I was getting incredible answers. I remember talking to one former federal prosecutor, and I was talking about LIBOR, and I said, how can nobody, this is the biggest crime in the history of the financial services industry, how can nobody be indicted for it? And he says, well, these aren't crimes. And I thought that was a really interesting answer. And then, when I was talking about HSBC with another law enforcement official, he gave me this incredible answer. I said, how can nobody go to jail for the HSBC thing? This is a narco-terrorism case, and they admitted it. It's not like it's even alleged. And he said, well, have you been to a jail? Those places are dangerous. And it sounds like a joke, but it's an important thing, because this is a crucial part of this story, is that it's an unquantifiable thing that's in the minds of law enforcement and in regulators, is this idea that this kind of offender is not the kind of person who's appropriate for jail. They actually used that term with me. And to really bring this out, I want to read a quote from a guy named Michael Stevens, who is the former Inspector General of the FHFA, which is the Federal Housing Finance Authority. And he was talking about how the FHFA had in the past indicted people, but that they were moving away from that practice because it had bad consequences. And here's what he said. He said, my organization has indicted 82 people. 3 of those people committed suicide recently. Why do I bring that up? Most of the people that we deal with are not hardened criminals. They're white collar. They're highly educated. They belong to churches. They have no prior arrest records. They're pillars of society. They're all making tremendous amounts of money, and when they do get caught, it's a little bit more difficult for them to take than it is for a street criminal. So the rationale here is that because it's harder for this kind of person to go to jail, let's not send them there. And as crazy as that sounds, that I think is a significant part of this whole phenomenon, is that when law enforcement looked at a lot of these crimes and said, yeah, well, sure, they're crimes, and sure, there was fraud in the hundreds of millions, and sure, this affected a lot of people, and people lost their jobs. And when you think specifically about, for instance, the subprime mortgage crisis, think about what those crimes actually meant. Okay, so if you're a teacher and you have a state pension, and your pension fund was sold phony mortgage-backed securities that collapsed in 2008, you might have lost 30 or 40% of your retirement income. These people stole that money from you. And yet, when the regulators looked at these people, they said, well, we can't really send these kinds of people to jail because that's not the kind of person that we send to jail. That person won't do well in jail. Let's instead get financial settlements for these kinds of people. And they would also offer up excuses. They would say, what good would it do to put that person in jail? That doesn't accomplish anything. What accomplishes something is let's get $8 billion from JP Morgan Chase or $7 billion from Citigroup, and we can do some good with that money. And so that was part of the thinking behind this whole thing. And